Do you know how many mainline Zelda games there have been over the years? About 20. And do you know how many versions of Hyrule Field we have seen? 4. Well, 4.5, technically, but you get my point. They each offer a unique version of Hyrule, of Link, of Zelda, and of course the good versus evil storyline that usually has Ganon or Ganondorf behind it all. Most of the time, anyway. Sometimes it's a guy who likes to lick Link, and sometimes it's a Pyramid Head wannabe until, it turns out, nope, it's actually Ganondorf behind it all again. But each and every one of those Zelda games offers the exact same thing: an adventure. Whether the open-ended designs of Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess, or the more sandbox open-world styles of Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, and even A Link to the Past, you know you're going to be in for an adventure no matter what. And with each version of Hyrule, there is always going to be some familiar locations. Of course, you have Hyrule Castle, that's always prevalent. Perhaps the Temple of Time, the homes of the Gerudo, the Zora, the Rito, the Gorons. You have Kakariko Village, Death Mountain. The point is, there are numerous locations that return throughout the series over and over again, but they're never truly the same. Breath of the Wild's Kakariko Village, for example, is hidden away in the hills, and it has this more traditional Japanese architecture where they focus on growing crops and has this small little graveyard off to the side. Ocarina of Time's version of Kakariko Village, however, is situated more along the direct path. It has a traditional, basic medieval style to the buildings, and while it doesn't have any crops, it does have this windmill for grain. There's also, of course, the more significant graveyard just behind this village as well. Both locations share the same name and the same ideas in terms of agricultural focus and the graveyard, but they both feel completely distinct. And this goes for every recurring location all throughout the Zelda series. All but one. This is Hyrule Field. Hyrule Field is, of course, as you may have guessed, a big open field, usually situated in the center of Hyrule Kingdom, and it is the access way to Hyrule Castle Town and Hyrule Castle itself. It's been featured in a few different games, as we've mentioned, but I've been thinking about this location a lot recently. With the recent announcement of the Nintendo Switch 2 Ocarina of Time Remake, I can't help but think what it might look like. Both the overall game, but just Hyrule Field as well. I mean, it's the first thing you see on the title screen after all. Will it be bigger? Will it be exciting? Will I spend hours upon hours just taking it all in this time around? It was really interesting to think about, but then the more I did think about it, I kind of realized what Hyrule Field's actual purpose is, what it means to the series. And now I feel like I actually know what to expect from Hyrule Field in the Ocarina of Time remake. And I'll explain what I mean, but first let's take a trip back through the last 28 years. No big deal, that's just my whole life. Behind me is Hyrule Field from 1998's Ocarina of Time, and then we have the Minish Cap, Twilight Princess, and of course, Breath of the Wild. There's Tears of the Kingdom too, of course, but it is mainly just the same map as Breath of the Wild, with some slight changes to it that we'll mention, but it's the same location. And that's it. Hyrule Field has appeared in the Zelda games a total of 4 unique times, 4.5 with Tears of the Kingdom, and this is of course not including Link's crossbow training and the 3 Hyrule Warriors games. It's just the mainline series. And much like the recurring Kakariko Village, both Breath of the Wild and Ocarina of Time's Hyrule Fields include the location of Lon Lon Ranch, while the Minish Cap has it just off to the side. Although granted, in Breath of the Wild there's much less of it to see. It's more like Lon Ranch. But otherwise, the only real repetition we see here is that Hyrule Field is just a big open field with lots of grass, and grass, sometimes with better grass, so But unlike Kakariko Village or any of the other recurring locations throughout the Zelda series, Hyrule Field always feels exactly the same. It's vast, it's empty, and it is significantly insignificant. And that's the point. As a kid playing Ocarina of Time, Hyrule Field seems like this vast, exciting area that leads you into every region of Hyrule across your adventure. And when you look at the official artwork of Hyrule Field that came with the 2011 3DS remake of Ocarina of Time, this is how the game is supposed to make you feel when you're in Hyrule Field. This is what it's supposed to be. Here, it just looks incredibly vast and exciting, but if we switch from the artwork to the actual game, it's not that vast. It's just a small, barren area that is supposed to make you feel like it's vast. It's supposed to give you that impression as you pass through it time and time again. In fact, I think the inevitable tedium that you feel from going through it so many times is intentional in a way to make you feel like it's bigger, another way to convince you that it's vaster than it actually is. Vaster? More vast? Yeah, you get the point. Going back further from the 3DS remake to the original, it only feels emptier. Just ignore that the skybox hasn't loaded in. It's usually there. The void isn't really helping it feel bigger. Now, I'm not saying Hyrule Field is done poorly here, not at all. It is doing exactly what it's intended to do, and it still gives you that feeling even 28 years later as you play Ocarina of Time. When you're playing the game yourself, you're down there on the ground, running through it, and it just feels like this big open field. But it's not just a giant open field with a grand view of everything laid out before you. It's kind of uneven terrain that obstructs your view to make it not obvious how actually small the place is. If you can't see over that hill, that could go on for miles, and in your mind, it kind of does, but realistically, it's only a stone's throw to the next boundary. Even from the raised plateau that is Lon Lon Ranch, you can't actually go up there and look out across the field. You are obstructed by the walls and the barriers. It doesn't let you look out there, because if it did, it would just break the illusion immediately, or it would have to implement a entirely different illusion to make Hyrule Field look big from up there, and it wouldn't be the same one you're traversing when you're actually down there, which would kind of throw you off or conflict the feelings. I think it's always interesting to think how games are put together like this, like how they are supposed to make you feel and why they don't do certain things. Anyway, you can't see Hyrule Field from here, and you're not supposed to. Speaking of illusion, here's a kind of interesting side note. Death Mountain in the 3DS remake, it's a huge looming mountain. You can view it from Hyrule Field, and it just seems so colossal. But in the original game, it's kind of there, just about. It's not as visible or looming. And actually, it's not even there at all. If you fly the camera out, it's just a couple of assets of the mountain itself and some rocky terrain. And interestingly, the mountain is actually in front of the terrain, but when you're looking at it from a distance or from Hyrule Field, it blends it in a way that makes the mountain appear as if it's behind the terrain and uses some clever parallax to make it seem like there's more depth than there is. So fun seeing how old games are made. But anyway, we're not here to look at different versions of Death Mountain today. We're here to look at Hyrule Field. Now, if we use that free cam to go all the way up into the air and look down upon Hyrule Field, you can see how small it actually is. You can see it in the way that you were never supposed to see it. There's a few paths, a few trees, there's the ranch over there, but ultimately, that's it. It's not very big or exciting. More so than ever, the game is certainly not vast by modern standards, of course it's not, but the game still makes it feel like it is. 28 years later, this feels huge when you're playing it. Even Lon Lon Ranch is bigger than it needs to be just to make it feel like it's vast, like it's just empty space in this huge area where there's some horses. It's supposed to feel like it's this massive ranch that you've stumbled upon, but it's like there's nothing there. It uses empty rendering to make this area that's so much bigger than you. It feels huge, but it doesn't actually back it up with any density or significance. And that's it. It's supposed to be insignificant in what it offers, but significant in how it makes you feel. Even in the opening title screen, we see this shot of Link riding Epona through the calm and quiet Hyrule Field. No dramatic music to set up this grand adventure, but instead it's just this peaceful melody as you are given these various views of the open field itself. It almost feels liminal, like this in between everything that you're doing, both in terms of how you traverse the game, but also in how this is where you are in the start menu. This is your space between everything else. Yes, I am calling Hyrule Field a liminal space. Look at it. Now, you could argue that any open field in real life is just a big empty area of land, and yes, you'd be correct, so there's no need to argue about it. Here is Hyrule Field in the Minish Cap. Well, part of it anyway. Hyrule Field in the Minish Cap is actually split into two locations, with Hyrule Town here in the center. Being a GBA game, there's not much to be said for how much is actually on offer here in North Hyrule Field or South Hyrule Field. They're not vast areas of land for you to explore and feel so small in. They're just locations between other locations. South Hyrule Field is actually where Link lives in this game, so it's interesting to think that it's the first place you'll actually see in the whole game. But as with any other Hyrule Field, these are situated in the center of the map and link to the other regions branching out as you explore. And even here, without the illusion of vastness, Hyrule Field remains a mundane focal point for your entire adventure. Once more, it's significantly insignificant. It just always feels the same. Then we have Hyrule Field from Twilight Princess. Now this is actually, at this point, the largest version of Hyrule Field that we had seen. In fact, it's about 5 times larger than Hyrule Field in Ocarina of Time. The main reason for that is that it's actually made up of several connected areas of Hyrule Field that all branch off into the different regions of the game. It feels reminiscent of how Hyrule Field is usually the access point for all of the other regions, of course, but instead of just purely being pathways into each region, it's pathways into another area of Hyrule Field before then reaching the next region. In fact, just this one area of Hyrule Field in front of the Hyrule Castle feels like the Hyrule Field from Ocarina of Time. It's basically the same. Just stick a Lon Lon wrench there and we're back in 1998. Hyrule Field in Twilight Princess does feel vast for a couple of reasons, and one of those is that it just kind of is big in this game. And while I'm not talking about the literal scale of these locations today, there is this Any Austin video from a few years ago that talks about Hyrule Field in Twilight Princess specifically and the scale of it. So go and watch that one if you're interested, as a little extra treat. Pause this one, go and watch it. Or just wait until this one's done and then go and watch it. Or do whatever you want. That said, I can only really pick apart Twilight Princess's Hyrule Field by using this FreeCam tool and by referring to my fading memory of having played this game over 15 years ago, because I don't actually have an easy way to access the game to play it. Thanks, Nintendo. I did spend a little bit of time looking around with this camera tool, and the most interesting thing I could find was these textures on Hyrule Castle and Castle Town just sort of Z-fighting here, which was... Thanks, Nintendo. But what's clear is that this version of Hyrule Field still acts as the central hub for the game and relies on its illusion of vastness. And while it is home to some key battles throughout the game and has some secrets of its own to discover, it still just feels insignificant. But again, not in a pointless way. It's supposed to feel like that. And finally, we have the versions of Hyrule Field from 2017's Breath of the Wild and subsequently 2023's Tears of the Kingdom. This is the first time in the series that Hyrule Field is, of course, actually vast without relying solely on the fabricated perception to make you think that it is. The overall map of Hyrule in this game is just huge and is completely open to you. There's no rules about progression, there's no barriers stopping you, there's no walls that you can't climb. It's a vast world, and as such, Hyrule Field itself is a vast location. It's located right here in the center of Hyrule Kingdom, as it always is, and it leads right up to Castle Town and Hyrule Castle itself. But this time, it's not the location you have to pass through to get to the other regions. It still can be, of course, and the path structure of the overall world is very much designed with that tradition in mind, but you can go anywhere from anywhere. This is an open sandbox world for you to go and explore however you want to, so Hyrule Field doesn't actually fall back on its usual particular purpose. But even with how big this location actually is, and with how free you are, and with how wonderful this whole world is, Breath of the Wild's Hyrule Field is still significantly insignificant. There's no real reason to go here. There are some secrets to discover, of course, and you can go and climb this tower to reveal the map, you can go and run away from some guardians, or you can go and visit the ruins of Lon Lon Ranch to reminisce in, but there's really nothing else. You'll go to each corner of the map for your main objectives, and then you'll go to Hyrule Castle itself at the end, and the final boss fight will actually take place in Hyrule Field, but until then, it's just kind of waiting there for that moment. Like when there's a music festival going on, it feels intentional and exciting, but any other day of the year, that's just a field. And that's all Hyrule Field really is. Just a field. More breaking news at 7. Now, Tears of the Kingdom does change Hyrule Field slightly, of course. Primarily by putting the base camp of Calamity survivors here in the center, which once again means that the core settlement for the game is in the middle of the map, since, you know, Hyrule Castle Town is still out of commission. There's also an entrance to the depths here, probably the first one you'll come across, but other than that, it's just the same old field, but without the Guardians this time, so maybe that's better, maybe that's worse, that's for you to decide. It's easily the least exciting location in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and that is by design. You're not supposed to spend a lot of time in Hyrule Field. You never really were, not in these games, nor in the previous ones. It's there to give you a moment to breathe, a moment of limbo between the rest of the adventure. Hyrule Field has and always will be a liminal space. And I know some people won't agree with me saying that, but it just is. It can be comforting, it can be familiar, it can be beautiful, but it will always be insignificant. It's the place between everything else. Now, I mentioned at the start of this video that the reason I've been thinking about all of this in the first place is because of the Ocarina of Time remake that we'll be getting later this year. We've only seen a glimpse of Link so far, so we don't really know what it's going to look like yet. At first I was wondering if Nintendo would dare to make changes to the game at all. I know the 3DS version in 2011 was a faithful one-to-one remake, especially as far as the scale of the locations went. But would Nintendo actually go bigger with it this time around? Would they try to make it feel more like this picture than anything we've ever experienced? And I don't mean bigger as in make Ocarina of Time open world like Breath of the Wild. That just wouldn't work. But specifically, I thought about Hyrule Field and how that could be more vast, and it could be more exciting, and it could have so many more reasons to explore it. It could push the Nintendo Switch 2 to give us the most fleshed out version of Hyrule Field that we've ever seen in all of Zelda history. But the more I stopped to look at Hyrule Field throughout the years, the more I realized that's just not the point. It was never a location that you're supposed to spend significant time in. It's supposed to be insignificant. And so I imagine we'll see this exact version of Hyrule Field once again, and at most it'll have Breath of the Wild's Blades of Grass, but not much more than that. And that would achieve exactly what it intends to do. That would be the Hyrule Field that we know. The Ocarina of Time remake doesn't need to actually be a big adventure by today's standards, it just needs to feel like a big adventure again. Hyrule Field will continue to be the lands between... Hyrule Field will continue to be the location between everything else. I'm sure it'll be more beautiful than ever, but it will still feel the same as we've always known it. And that's exactly what it should be. Going to blow your mind right now? You're not going to believe this. I'm not actually in Hyrule Field. I I've never been there. People tell me to touch grass, and I say, what's the point if it's not Breath of the Wild's blades of grass? That's the grass I want to touch. Okay, we're done.